now, right now. Right 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 now, right now. Oh, I got a real good feeling.
We try to bring you high-quality educational and informational content every single day. Why do you think the price is having such an anemic time? The news story of the hour. Jump onto the chart. Is this the beginning of a massive financial unraveling? We gotta add a little addendum to the show map today, so we start here on the daily. Now, we've been looking at the RSI on Bitcoin's daily chart for the last several days. Well, what's happening? It's been increasing over the last 50 years since the government has been
Ha 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 ha. I was playing a mime there for a second. Hey guys, what's going on? Jebb here, and welcome back to Coffee and Crypto Live. This is your weekdaily morning show where we bring you the latest in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency technical, on-chain, and fundamental analysis. And I have a very exciting update for all of you guys. I'm getting a haircut as soon as the stream's over. I'm going to get a haircut, and you guys have been telling me for a long time I need one. I've had so much work to do. I've not been able to find the time, but things are calming down a little bit, at least for a few weeks. And I'm going to go get a haircut. I'm so excited. I'm going to get a haircut. It's just like, man, Bitcoin's just going to pump. I think Bitcoin's going to go up because I'm finally getting my haircut. Whenever I do so, like whenever I leave, if ever I'm gone for a couple of days, if ever I like take a break from the stream, which I don't do very much, but if I do take a break, then Bitcoin just drops. So whenever, maybe if I get my haircut, the market will go up. I don't know. Maybe that'll be our price prediction for today. Nevertheless, we actually do have a price prediction for today, and it's a very strange one. This one says that Bitcoin will go up by 500x within the next 30 years or so and capture 25% of global wealth. If you don't know, the global wealth, the GDP of the world, if you will, sits at roughly $100 trillion. So in today's dollars, this prediction represents $25 trillion in market capitalization on Bitcoin. Is that a realistic price prediction for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies over the next, let's call it 30 to 40 years? We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about a couple of other big things that are in the news. One of those things, which is quite sad that it has taken this long, that is drawn out this far, maybe I should say, is that the Russian-Ukrainian war has just turned 1 year old. February 24th, 2022, Russia launched basically a war of conquest on Ukraine, and they've basically made themselves very clear as to what they were trying to do. Everybody knew what it was beforehand, but Russia has, in recent days, made it very clear, Putin has made it very clear, that Russia is essentially trying to conquer Ukraine for the sake of reclaiming ancestral territory, which is like the exact definition of one of the many types of international war crimes that you can commit, and also trying to expand and rebuild the Soviet Union. There's even whispers that they may even try to invade Belarus relatively soon, which that wouldn't be so much of an invasion as it would be just a union, because the guy that's in charge of Belarus is one of the people that helped Putin get into power. His name is Lukashenko, and he is a dictator. So Belarus, maybe it'll get invaded. Maybe it'll just kind of fall into the fold of Russia. Putin's trying to rebuild the Soviet Union. We're going to talk about that, and we're also going to discuss the imminent collapse of China this decade. I know people have been saying this for 20 years, but people have been saying this for 20 years about the 2020s, and it's here. How is that going to impact the Bitcoin market? How is that going to impact geopolitics, globalization, and your standard of living, considering so many things are made in China? We're going to talk about all of that and more in today's episode of Coffee and Crypto Live, but of course, we're going to spend quite a bit of time on the charts as well. Let's go ahead and read some chat, because I know we've got an explosive, sensational headline today. It is not my price prediction. It is someone else's that I read today, and I really want to break into it because it is an interesting idea. 500x on Bitcoin from here. That'd be a 50,000% gain from where we are right now. Is that possible? Is that even realistic? Let's find out. Queen is the first person in chat today. Said hi, hello to you, Queen. Thank you for being a bedrock member of our stream chat. Thank you so much. Wisely T, quick on the draw with that copy and pasted message. Wisely, almost as soon as the chat went live, you sent this message. Morning, Jebb. Is Ada staking on Yoroi? I can never pronounce that. Yoroi or Daedalus at risk with the Kraken news, or is it different? I'm not too familiar with the first one of those wallets, but Daedalus wallet, as far as I'm aware, let's put that out there. As far as I'm aware, it shouldn't be the exact same thing because that's not really custodial. In theory, that's supposed to be totally decentralized, and that's not supposed to be connected to a certain exchange like Kraken. So in theory, anyway, that should not be under the same purview as the type of attack that Kraken came under over the last couple of weeks, where the SEC told them, shut down your staking or we're going to shut it down for you. And so they settled for $30 million. Rock and Metal News in chat said, hey, Jebb, what's up, Rock and Metal News? Welcome to the stream. Mike Lowry's in chat said, good morning. Happy #FinSov Friday. Let's see some FinSov Friday in chat. Guys, FinSov is the concept that I want to make just so big all over social media. I want everybody to be talking about this. FinSov is the idea of having total control and sovereignty and dominion over your wealth rather than it dominating you. I want your wealth to work for you, not the other way around. Very simply, that should be the goal of everybody's financial journey, is getting their finances into a place where whatever it is that you feel led to do, you are able to do because you have finances to back it up. That's where I want your finances to be, and that's how I want you to be financially sovereign. We've got Grand Roofing Incorporated in chat. We've got Oleg Kyunku. Welcome to chat, my friend. Oleg. Welcome, Oleg. We've got Floki. Looking for Floki. Okay. We got Win Peoples in chat. What's up? We got Jojo in chat. Mike Lowry. Oh my is in chat. CBD Suddy. What's up, man? Crypto Ben Franklin said, good morning. Happy Friday. Crypto Mini Bike in chat. OMAC in chat. Silent in chat. Jeff Oldfield said, happy Friday, Jebb. Happy Friday to you as well. Russia is trying to take Ukraine. U.S. took PR. No real difference other than the year it happened. Yeah, there's a little bit of truth to that. At the same time, one's happening right now, and that's why everybody's talking about it. OMAC is in chat right now. Send a member chat. I will never sell my Bitcoin and only use it for my children's generations. FinSov. Boom. Good deal. Is market cap the only thing that can manipulate the price of Bitcoin? Not even close. There's a lot of things that manipulate the price of Bitcoin, and we're going to talk about a lot of them today. As you guys know, this is a primarily technical analysis live stream, but I also talk quite a bit about macroeconomics and geopolitics on this channel, and we're going to kind of touch on both today. But since you clicked on this stream because of that crazy 500x price prediction, I think we should go ahead and start there. It's only fair after all. Over on Cointelegraph, I saw this article this morning. Bitcoin eyes 25% of world's wealth in new $10 million Bitcoin price prediction. Bitcoin can see its market cap increase 500 times over, Jesse Myers believes, thanks to its inherent scarcity and other traits. Normally, I don't read an article like this. I just kind of talk about it and then leave the article just as part of my research. But I'm actually going to read from it today because there's some quotes in here I want to bring to your attention. Jesse Myers said this: value stored in Bitcoin becomes worth more and more over time because of Bitcoin's design of increasing scarcity. You just have to outlast the admittedly brutal volatility along the way. I would absolutely agree with that statement. With that in mind, we have to ask ourselves an important question. When Bitcoin's mechanics continue to play out, causing it to continue appreciating reliably in value every 4 years, will more than 0.05% of the world's capital eventually realize it wants to be in an asset like this? I think the only logical conclusion is yes. I also agree with this statement. It's kind of funny. You can agree with most, if not all. You might know where I'm going with this. My conservative estimation suggests an outrageous full potential for Bitcoin's price at $10 million per Bitcoin in today's dollars. To put this another way, I believe Bitcoin's full potential is to eat a quarter of the world's value, while today it constitutes only 0.05%. That's absurd. That means I believe Bitcoin could 500x over the coming decades in real inflation-adjusted terms. That's where I'm not so sure about this. We'll talk about this prediction in a second, but I also want to show you this chart here that Cointelegraph so lovingly added in. You can see that they show different things that you can invest in or put your money in and how that wealth will evolve or devolve over time. Consumption, obviously, you lose most of your wealth very quickly because you are spending that money. Depreciating assets like vehicles, buildings, and equipment says they go down. That's not entirely true. It depends on the kind of building you buy. Inflationary assets like fiat currencies and airline miles, obviously those go down. Then scarce assets, gold, land, some art collections, boom, they go up. Equities, they're scarce assets plus real returns or growth And then Bitcoin is a scarce asset plus increasing scarcity plus early stage growth. That early stage growth is not going to last forever, though, because we're not always going to be in the early stages of Bitcoin. Eventually, we get into a maturation era in Bitcoin's history, and that's where we're going to find ourselves now. So what do we make of this prediction that Bitcoin is going to go to $10 million and 500x and eat up a quarter of the world's wealth? Well, the reason that we talk about geopolitics and globalization and macroeconomics on this channel is because to answer that question, you absolutely must look at that kind of question through the lens of demographics, of nations, of globalization, of geopolitics and macroeconomics. And to just put all the cards on the table, for Bitcoin to be worth 25% of the world's value, it absolutely must be the world reserve currency, based on the way the model works right now. Unless people no longer store value in their local currency or in the world reserve currency, but instead they're storing value for longer periods of time in Bitcoin, which is definitely a phenomenon that's going to take place. But unless we have another branch of economics open up where people completely intrinsically change the way that they operate with currency and they move all of their value that they're not using in the next 30 days out of a fiat currency and hold it in Bitcoin, which is possible, that price prediction of 25% of global value, I think, is asinine. And coming from a Bitcoin, not maximalist, but definitely a Bitcoin enthusiast, I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist because I think a lot of the other altcoins have great potential as well, that it might be shocking for you to say, wait a minute, Jebb, you think that's not going to happen? Well, hang on a second. I love Bitcoin, but I'm also a realist. I'm not going to sit here and clickbait you with things that I think are nonsense. Now, to be clear, I think Bitcoin could eat up 2.5% to 5% of world value. What do I mean by that? Well, I think the market for people storing their wealth in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is a big one. Case in point, you look at gold, it's worth $10 trillion. You look at Bitcoin, it's worth $500 billion. That would be a 20x from where we are right now. 20x on top of where Bitcoin is right now. That would bring us to between, depending on market capitalization, between circulating supply, which is going to go down gradually over time, between $500,000 and $1 million. I think from there, even more people will get into Bitcoin, and I think you will see Bitcoin inflation adjusted drive well beyond $1 million in the next 2 decades. That being said, and I'll just make this very simple because I don't want to put all of our attention into this because I also want to cover today's TA. There's a lot I want to go into today, but I'll make this simple. The reason I don't think that that's going to happen is because for an asset to make up 25% of global value. By the way, 25% of the world's value is equivalent to the GDP of the United States or of Europe. Both of those are about a quarter of the world's economies. So for Bitcoin to make up the size of the United States economy, it would need to make up the same thing that builds the United States economy, which is world reserve currency status, among other things. But that's on the currency side of things. For Bitcoin to become world reserve currency status, a lot would need to take place. First and foremost, Bitcoin would need to be able to handle millions of transactions per second, which is theoretically possible with a layer 2 solution like Lightning Network, but that is going to take a lot of development. Again, it could happen, but it's going to be very difficult. On top of that, throughout all of human history, generally speaking, the world reserve currency status has gone to whatever nation has the largest military. There's two problems there. Number one, Bitcoin is not a nation. Number two, Bitcoin does not have a military. The whole point of it is for it to be decentralized and to not have those things. Now, the entire world's paradigm of what makes up the world reserve currency status could very well change in the future, and maybe people will be more interested in going into something like a Bitcoin. Maybe people will be more interested in going out of something like a world reserve currency status, a world reserve currency. That is a trend that's going to take place, but you're not going to get the vast majority of companies doing that. A lot of them and a lot of states are going to continue operating in state-issued currencies because they want to be able to work in a currency that there is a military behind, because it's not just economics that drives somebody to work in a certain currency. It's also geopolitics, military power, and global relations in the form of geopolitics and in globalization terms. So, can Bitcoin 500x? Adjusted for inflation, yes. I think Bitcoin could 500x, considering the US dollar is going to lose value. In today's dollars, I think you're going to see a 50x maybe. You might see a $2 million Bitcoin. I'm not sure if you'll see 25% of the world's value sitting in Bitcoin I'm just not sure that's exactly the niche that Bitcoin fulfills. But don't come for me in the comments with your pitchforks and your torches, because I'm still saying that I think Bitcoin could go up 50x from where it is right now. That's 5,000%. And by the way, there's other cryptocurrencies around the cryptocurrency space that are still going to make a lot of gains as well. I still think Bitcoin is one of the strongest investments that you can make right now, although it is a little bit more risky than a lot of others. But at the same time, it's also risky not being in Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the thing that is going to, it is the asset vehicle that people are going to use to get out of inflation. So there's my take on that. Are we going to see a 500x on Bitcoin? I'm not sure I would agree with that statement, but what I will say is that I think Bitcoin is going to be worth vastly more than it is right now at $500 billion. All right, let's go ahead and look at the shorter term time frames. We're going to look at the shorter term time frames. We're going to do some TA here for about 10, 15, 20 minutes. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about the war in Ukraine and China. This will be a little bit more of a geopolitical heavy stream, and you'll see why. I'm going to tie all of it right back into the analysis that we're going to do here. On this stream, I do talk about things that are geopolitical, macroeconomic, but I try and tie them right back into the charts, because I know that's where you guys can visually see the charts. All right, so Bitcoin's currently trading at $23,683 and change, and that's a very significant level that we're trading at, because we're essentially sitting right here below this flat level of support at 23,838, which was constituted by this drop that we saw on February the 19th, which was a Sunday. Bitcoin has been gradually pushing back down into this level in what you might call a falling wedge. A couple of things here. Number one, falling wedges typically break to the upside, but number two, most people aren't going to draw that as a falling wedge. Most people are going to draw that as a descending triangle pattern. Descending triangle patterns are patterns that you extrapolate to the downside, and that pushes us with a price target down to 22,808. At this point, it is starting to look a little bit more likely that we're going to see a drop down to 22,808. And even in just the last hour, as we've been talking here together, we have seen Bitcoin drop a couple $100 and make fresh lows that it has not seen during this drop. I do not believe we've gone below this low yet. You can see we're making fresh lows right now. So that's interesting. It's always, you know, I do a stream every single day, so it's not uncommon that I'll be saying something, and then as soon as I say it, it like happens. The point I was about to make, and Bitcoin's kind of doing this right now, is that Bitcoin's probably going to drop down here to at least 23,328, probably down to 22,808. And even as I'm saying that, I mean, we're live right now. Hello, we're live. Bitcoin's dropping down there. A few different major reasons for that. I'm about to show you on Lux Algo, but one of the big ones here is this downtrending level of resistance. That downtrending level of resistance has really kind of set the stage for Bitcoin over the last several days, and it is really the thing that is defining the trend right now. If you drew a trend line straight through this market, basically, if you remember back to 8th grade math class, this is called the line of best fit. You look at kind of like the line of best fit here, and it is essentially a gradual downtrend on Bitcoin. Now, a couple of things here. Bitcoin is already broken below and has been trading quite a bit below this level of support. So this level of support is not going to give us that much of a helping hand, which means that we're probably going to end up dropping down to 23,328, because a lot of times Bitcoin will act like it's going up and down a staircase. You don't stand halfway between one step and another, because then you act like Wile E. Coyote and you're just standing there and then you fall because you just somehow hovered for a few seconds. I don't understand it either, but that's what Bitcoin does sometimes. It just sits there for a little bit in between the steps, and then it says, oh, wait a second, gravity, and it falls to the downside. That's what we're looking at right now. Bitcoin is sitting right here halfway between two stair steps, and it's probably going to fall down to 23,328. And frankly, I think it'll actually fall down to 22,808 at this point in time with how much bearishness I'm seeing. Now, there's another thing that gives me more confidence in that, and that would be Lux Algo. As you can see, Bitcoin has been under a confirmed sell signal on Lux Algo ever since Wednesday, the 22nd of February, 2023. Around 8 a.m., that was when we initially dropped below 23,838. Notice, Lux Algo did not actually confirm bearish here until we were actually below this support level. I really like to see that. Now, we did bounce up above it, but we had confirmed the sell signal at that point, so Bitcoin was going to have to really prove itself to show, no, actually, we are in an uptrend. And so it has not managed to do that. It did not manage to punch through the EQ cloud. We fell right back to the downside. 4-hour chart is going to tell you a very similar story. We've been following this chart very closely for the last couple of days. This is the one thing that could explain why Bitcoin is hovering here, and this is what I wanted to show you, because the EQ cloud is that. Why is Bitcoin sitting right here? Well, as I've explained, Lux Algo is such a popular technical indicator by now that it's almost reached this kind of legendary status where so many people are using it that they're actually utilizing what it shows on its indicator as levels of support, like you would find from price action or from moving averages or from RSI or from MACD. It actually is that big of an indicator at this point that it's actually having a direct impact on the market, is what it seems. And right now, Bitcoin is holding right here above the bottom of the EQ cloud on the 4-hourly chart. And that is the one argument that you can make as to why Bitcoin is holding right here. That, and also that it looks pretty similar to these recent local lows that we've seen. This is more or less a triple bottom on this uptrending level, which is the bottom of the EQ cloud, but it is a descending triangle pattern. That descending triangle pattern very likely will end up breaking to the downside. And frankly, unless we have a very large bounce here over the next, let's call it 12 hours, where Bitcoin is able to increase in price, rally up to at least $24,250, break through the top of the EQ cloud, then normally what's going to happen from here is that if you're trading on the bottom side of the EQ cloud, you're going to end up falling out of it and falling to the other side. I don't like being the bearer of bad news, but the fact of the matter is the TA right now is reading much more bearish on the hourly chart and the 4-hourly chart. So where does that leave Bitcoin over the next couple of days? Again, that likely leads to Bitcoin having a larger correction down to something like 22,808. That's not the end of the world, though, because if you look at the daily chart, 22,808 constitutes this high that we set Tuesday, September 13th of 2022, a couple of months before FTX imploded upon itself in spectacular fashion. And when we do fall back down and hit that level of support, we will probably fight very hard to hold that level of support. In doing so, we would be going through a small, and yes, I do mean a small, correction here in this broader uptrend that Bitcoin finds itself in right now. And it's very possible that Bitcoin could end up going through a rally after it bounces from 22,808 and then breaking through $25,000. It is going to need to find some kind of bullish catalyst to really allow that sort of market movement to occur. But there is heavy possibility right now based on a multitude of different long-term technical factors and climate-related, if you will, not literal weather climate, but climate-related in the sense of geopolitical and macroeconomic factors that could encourage Bitcoin to move to the upside like that. Now, one of the things I also want to talk to you about is one of the big drivers of why Bitcoin is going through a correction right now. And it should jump out at you pretty starkly as soon as I show you. If you will recall, I have spoken at length about how the S&P 500 is positively correlated to Bitcoin and the Dixie is inversely correlated to Bitcoin. Whenever the Dixie is going down, oftentimes Bitcoin is going up. Whenever the Dixie is going up, oftentimes Bitcoin's going down. Same thing, but in the inverse with the S&P. When the S&P is going up, so too does Bitcoin. When it goes down, as does our favorite cryptocurrency. Looking at the S&P right now, you could see it has gone through a pretty major drop even just over the last 24 hours. One of the things that could have caused this drop would be the fact that we are now 1 year into the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It is not all that common that wars such as this last for that long. However, this war has lasted that long, and you can see what the stock market in the United States has done in that time. On an absolute sense, on a year-over-year basis, the stock market has basically only lost 5%. But from a volatility standpoint and also paying attention to where the market has spent the majority of its time, the market has lost a lot of value when you look at this not as a line, but as a two-dimensional area. We've lost a lot of value over a lot of time since that conflict began. And the stock market is having a lot of trouble rallying for a multitude of reasons. Some of them I've spoken about recently. We're going to talk about some of them in a little bit. That one being the demographical issue, but we're also looking at relations issues between the United States and China. You're looking at huge relational issues between the United States, China, and also Europe. Now, Europe and the United States are operating very well, but both of those economies together are having trouble maintaining what they are used to because a lot of their trade partners, China, Russia, and some of their allies are not exactly operating in the best faith around the world. That has led the stock market into a very difficult position, where the stock market is attempting to go through a rally, but it has almost everything stacked against it right now. We have, on the one hand, an increasing effective federal funds rate. You can see that right over here. The EFFR is one of the most important numbers for markets in the entire world, not just in the U.S. stock market, but globally. And right now we're sitting at 4.5. on the effective federal funds rate. That is only likely to increase by at least 1%, considering CPI is failing to come down as fast as the Fed would like it to. On top of that, the other thing, and I don't have a chart for this up right now, but I can go ahead and tell you, is that the Fed is shrinking its balance sheet by $97.5 billion every single month. They're trying to roll off $9 trillion in quantitative easing off of their balance sheet in the span of 3 years. They want to have it all off by, I think it is May of 2026. So when they attempt to do something like that, that is going to cause a huge amount of blowback in the United States stock market, because the United States stock market and debt market is worth tens and tens and tens of trillions of dollars, but a lot of that money that is in the market right now came from the Fed's quantitative easing of injecting money straight into the market. There's $9 trillion of quantitative easing still floating around in treasuries and mortgage-backed securities, or if investors that held those different assets sold them into something else, then they moved that money that the Fed put into the market by buying those treasuries and mortgage-backed securities elsewhere. They moved it into high-risk investments that they consider high risk anyway, like Bitcoin and crypto. They moved it into places like tech stocks. They moved it into places like real estate. They moved it into places like investing in Lockheed Martin and Boeing, which are great investments right now. When the Fed rolls off $9 trillion of investment that they have in treasuries and mortgage-backed securities over the next 3 years, that essentially takes $9 trillion out of the market, and the amount of capital in the market shrinks dramatically, and you have a much tighter market on the one hand, which hurts the stock market, helps inflation. But on the other hand, you have a double whammy going on right now where there's a demographical change in the United States, where on average last quarter 4 of 2022, the boomers aged into retirement. That means that those boomers are no longer putting money into the stock market because they're investors. They're no longer producing money in the GDP sense because they are working a job. And when they have investments, they're no longer deploying money into the investments. They're taking money out of the investments to buy a new golf cart. So that, combined with the Fed shrinking the balance sheet, is a huge bearish dump on the stock market. And of course, as I've talked about with you, the stock market is one of the most powerful correlations that Bitcoin has. People ask me all the time, Jebb, why do you talk about geopolitics so much? It is very important because geopolitics and macroeconomics are the two biggest drivers of the stock market, and the stock market is the biggest driver of Bitcoin. Period. Full stop. That's not the only reason, but that's a big reason. So, again, we're talking about Bitcoin, though. Bitcoin is having a hard time right now because of its correlation, which is very strong, to the S&P 500. You can see the S&P 500 was rallying very, very strongly in January. Bitcoin was doing a great job during that time. It did not manage to continue in that rally. Why? Because the stock market fell over, and also because the Dixie, if I show you here, started to go through a rally as well. At the same time that the stock market bottomed out, the Dixie started to go into a rally, and we have seen both of these correlations hurting Bitcoin very dearly. Now, Bitcoin can break away from these correlations and go on a rally anyway if there is ample enthusiasm in the cryptocurrency market. But what that's going to take at this point would be a small correction, more than likely, because it's going to happen anyway, and then a bounce in a rally, setting new local highs above 25K. If Bitcoin can set a new local high above 25K, or at least just hold above $23,000 for the next several months, at some point, the stock market will go into a rally again and Bitcoin will follow it. You can see, ever since the war in Ukraine began, we've had 4 rallies. 1, 2, there's a few smaller ones here, 3, and then 4. They happen every 60 to 150 days. Even if the stock market does go through a drop and it drops another 15 to 20 points on the S&P 500, eventually it'll bounce. Eventually it'll continue moving to the upside, more than likely anyway. And even if it doesn't set new local highs, even if the stock market going up doesn't break us above 420, which is totally not priced in, then Bitcoin could follow that movement, break new local highs on $25,000, get enough enthusiasm back in it of itself to sustain a rally in the future. But for Bitcoin to really take off and rally on its own and really have a mind of its own where it can actually just push forward and go in a bull market, even going against a short-term trend in the Dixie or the S&P, Bitcoin really needs to get above $25,236 and change. It needs to stay up there for a while so that it can confirm and lock in that movement. If Bitcoin can do that, then I think Bitcoin is going to be in very bullish territory. However, if Bitcoin cannot get above 25,236, it might just sit here stagnant between $20,000 and $25,000 for a while until something happens that allows it to go into a big rally. But that wouldn't exactly be the worst scenario in the world, because if that does take place, looking at the VRVP, that would just give Bitcoin even more support down here, build an even stronger foundation from which Bitcoin can go into a big rally. Remember, guys, Bitcoin doesn't always just go into a huge rally the moment that it hits its bottom. Down here in back here, I should say, in 2015, Bitcoin bottomed out at let's see, $160 here, $163, bounced and rallied all the way up to 300, doubled, then went through a huge correction of about 30%, then rallied back, set a double top, then dropped again, and then went on a rally. If we were to plot our current market over this market, we're right here. The actual bull market started right here, like 200 days later. That is a possible scenario, and one that you shouldn't be scared of, because it does give you more time to accumulate and more time to learn about cryptocurrency, which, if you don't know very much about cryptocurrency, the best place to learn is in Club DeFi's Principles of Technical Analysis. Make sure to check that out with the link in the description box down below. But it is possible that Bitcoin sits down here and trades sideways for the next 8 months. I think that's I think that's one of the more bearish scenarios. I think it is more likely that come summertime, maybe into early fall, you're going to see a big rally on Bitcoin, especially after there's been some kind of break in confidence of what's going to happen in the war in Ukraine. We'll talk about that in a second. But with all of those factors in mind, as I said, the most important thing Bitcoin can do right now is break above $25,000 confidently. And frankly, if not for FTX collapsing, I think that would have already occurred. Now, I'm going to go ahead and read chat. Thank you guys so very much for tuning in. We've got almost 600 people watching live right now. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button, hit that post notification bell so you won't miss a single stream. All right. Queen says she bought Finsov domain name. Really? Finsov.com. That's really? Finsov.com. I see it here. Over on Perfect Domain. It's $4,000. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to pay $4,000 for... I don't think we're going to pay $4,000 for a domain name right now. I have paid that much for a domain name before, but not going to right now. Not for that, but maybe in the future. Maybe if it's still there. I'm not sure which... Did you buy that one, Queen? I hope you didn't spend $4,000 on that. All right. Jay said, love you, Jebb. Thank you so much. We got Matt C in chat. What's going on, Matt C? I appreciate you don't clickbait. People who do that instantly lose my respect. Hey, look, I am not going to lie. I will be a little bit sensational in a title and show you the most exciting thing that's in the news right now. Crazy 500x Bitcoin price prediction. That got your attention, didn't it? I in nowhere in that title said that I think that, and I hope I didn't imply that either. But it was the topic. It's clickbait when there's a lie or there's deceit in there. And as a Christian, I don't play that game. I don't lie to you guys. I don't deceive you guys. At least that's not what my Lord would do. That's not what I want to do. Nobody's perfect. We've all made mistakes in our lives. I'm not going to sit here and say that I am totally perfect in that, because I'm not. I'm not blameless in that. But that's certainly not my heart, and I definitely don't make a habit of lying to you guys. All right. Talking about an army, Bitcoin's the biggest army in the world right now. If you compare to power in joules, check it out, bro. That's a good point, but that's not really the way that most people look at it. Oh, Finsov.crow is mine. I just checked. Wow, nice. Cool. Oddly, very little traffic in rainy LA this morning. That I'm already at work. There you go. Glad I'm already at work. Let's see. My Boomer Squad NFT. It has utility. I'm earning crow. There you go. Jebb is right about stock market correlation. It's very powerful. It's very, very powerful. Very, very powerful. Let's see here. Tell us about CPI report. Somebody spam in the chat. Let's not spam the chat, guys. It's okay. Right. All right. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and have timeout here. We're going to put you in timeout, Slow Stay. We're going to put you in timeout, but we can talk a little bit about CPI. I talked about how CPI is impacting the market. I have actually spoken about that a lot. That's one of the big topics that we cover here on the channel. CPI is one of the biggest drivers of the economy right now, and it did drop from 6.5% down to 6.4% on Valentine's Day of this month, which was a very small drop compared to what most people were expecting. Now, I also want to talk a little bit about the war in Ukraine. Now, I know some of you guys, this isn't your favorite topic, but let me just explain to you why we talk about it quite significantly. The fact of the matter is, the canvas upon which all of human history is painted on is politics and geopolitics, geography, economics. Bitcoin is just one painting in that great mural that we call human history. And so whenever we're talking about Bitcoin, we have to understand the context. Context is key. We've spoken about this extensively on the channel, but I want you guys to understand that to understand what's going on in Bitcoin, you must first and foremost and most importantly understand, at least on a surface level, what's going on globally, even if the only reason you're doing it is so that you can sound cool to your friends. Because it's enjoyable to talk about these things, even though the things that we're talking about are not always the most enjoyable. In fact, what we're about to talk about is heinous and horrendous and horrible, but it is absolutely important for anyone who is an investor in markets because it is the biggest driver of the global economy right now. Full stop, bar none, absolutely 100% confident in that statement. It is the biggest driver of the global economy by far. And for that reason, it is the biggest driver of the Bitcoin market right now, that being the war in Ukraine. You think I'm crazy? Except for every once in a while when we have a big FUD or FOMO news story like FTX going bankrupt or the SEC driving into the space and just saying, yeah, we're just going to shut all this down. Other than when you have a week of headlines that are very exciting, that is the biggest driver of Bitcoin by far. Why? Because it's driving everything else that impacts Bitcoin. Everything else that has any impact on Bitcoin, that being the Dixie, the S&P, the CPI, the average cost of goods, the housing market, all of that is driven very consequentially by the war in Ukraine and how the war in Ukraine has affected internal and foreign affairs in the United States and the world over. So it's been 1 year. 1 year ago today, we live streamed to you guys and we told you, unfortunately, that Russia had declared war on the Ukrainian state. A little bit of history here until 1991 or 2. I'm forgetting my exact history there. Ukraine was a part of the Soviet Union. It was a crown jewel, 1991, I believe, end of 1991. It was one of the crown jewels of the Soviet Union because it had a few different things going for it. Number one, Ukraine had a ton of people that the Russians would put into their army. Number two, it made a ton of food. Number three, it was a huge steel manufacturing state in the Warsaw Pact. And four, Crimea was the place that every single Russian monarch going all the way back to the Tsardom would go and vacation because the Crimean Peninsula was basically like Russia's little Hawaii. That's where everybody would go to party and drink their champagne and be bougie. And so that's one of the reasons that Putin wanted to take Crimea was because of that history and because he wanted to reestablish the Soviet Union. So you fast forward 30 years, Ukraine now is its own independent nation, and in 2014, the Russians invaded Ukraine, and Ukraine fell over sideways, couldn't get a grip on themselves. They had no real central cohesiveness in their nation, and they had horrible histories of black market arms dealing and corruption and all of this stuff that people say about Ukraine back then. A lot of it's true, and some of it still goes on. Ukraine's not perfect. But by the time that 2022 rolled around and that Russia decided that they were going to finally go ahead and march into Ukraine, they assumed that Ukraine would do the same thing. They would fall over. That wasn't the case by then. By then, Ukraine had built some kind of national identity around fighting against Russia, who was invading Crimea. And they'd also been trained and equipped by quite a lot of NATO militaries, both through the training and through the equipment. And so they were actually much more formidable than the Russians expected. And so over the first 2 months, the Ukrainians were able to push the Russians out of the regions around Kiev, which is the capital. Now, during that time, Russia realized something, or at least they should have realized, maybe they didn't. This was not going to be a pushover. They were not going to conquer this nation in 2 minutes and then push on Moldova and Poland just next. Instead, they were actually going to have to dig in. They were going to have to fight. And now we've devolved this war into what looks like World War I or World War II trench warfare style fighting. And so the way that this impacts globalization and going back to crypto, because again, I want to tie right back into Bitcoin here, is that this has completely thrown the chessboard of geopolitics straight in the air, and now we got to watch and see how the pieces land. NATO has become extremely unified. Russia thought that they'd be able to break them apart. NATO became extremely unified, fighting against Russia economically, and through military hardware and software and tactical and strategic support of the Ukrainians. In doing so, that has caused most of the NATO alliance to rally around the idea of economically fighting Russia at all costs, even if that means that their own economies suffer. That's where the Fed has been trying to get inflation under control, and you can see how all this starts tying back into crypto. That's where the Fed has been trying aggressively to get inflation back under control. They started ramping quantitative easing. They stopped quantitative easing, the very last bit of it, the Treasury and the mortgage-backed securities buying. They stopped that and started rolling it off a few months after the war began. On top of that, they started raising the interest rates like 2 months after, because the Fed realized, okay, we don't have 10 years to fix this. We need to get our own economy under control right now so that if this drags out into another 50-year-long Cold War, we have an extremely powerful dollar, because the dollar is one of the most potent weapons that the United States wields, much more effective than their nuclear arsenal, because God forbid the nuclear arsenal ever gets used. The dollar arsenal is used every single day. So that's had a major impact on the U.S. stock market. The United States stock market is largely driven, as Queen loves to talk about in the chat, by the debt market. You're talking about things like mortgage-backed securities. You're talking about other kinds of ABS, those being different things that are securities that are backed by other things. So you're talking about credit card debt, REITs, different things that have to do with debt really drive the market. And a lot of that debt market has changed dramatically because of the demographical changes with the boomers that we talk about, and because of all of that money starting to leave circulation because of quantitative easing, turning it now into quantitative tightening. All of that has changed the dynamic, and we've seen very serious consequences and fallout from that happening in tech. Remember a few months ago when you were seeing everybody was laying off 10,000 employees? Google was laying off 10,000 employees. Now Google's under an antitrust lawsuit from the United States government as well. You see Netflix, you see all the FANG stocks, you see Meta, I guess now, Meta laying off a lot of employees, all of them laying off employees. That's because of what's going on in Ukraine through the lens of how the Fed is trying to combat them economically, and the fallout that that's had on the economy. The war in Ukraine and the end of globalization as we know it has led to the way that the Fed is manipulating the dollar, which has led to the way that the stock market in the United States and Bitcoin market has been responding to that. So everybody wants to say, oh, wow, the biggest driver of the stock market right now is the way the Fed is working with the market, with the quantitative easing now turning into quantitative tightening, and the rolling off of treasuries and mortgage-backed securities, the effective federal funds rate, and inflation being pretty high. All of those things are directly driven at this point by either the remnants of the pandemic and the way that the pandemic was responded to, and by the war in Ukraine. Let me just paint that picture again, because this is something that you can go and tell your friends. This is something you can brag about. And just say like, hey, I understand this. Here, you want to understand? Here's the deal. Russia invaded Ukraine. That was always going to happen, sadly, but it was always going to happen. And we will talk about the chart here in about 2 minutes because I see it moving. That threw the chessboard out the window. All of NATO was trying to recover from the pandemic. They said, okay, we need to triple time our recovery and increase rates and stop quantitative easing very fast, put a brake on the inflation, and get this under control no matter what. The economy's doing decent and unemployment's okay, so we can go ahead and be very aggressive in that. That caused the stock market to go through a huge crash, on top of the fact that the global instability also caused a crash in stocks, and especially in high-risk tech stocks. And then that changed the debt market and the liquidity that was able to go into Bitcoin, and that just exacerbated the bear market that was already taking place on Bitcoin. Now, how that whole situation evolves over the rest of this year and on into the next 5 to 10 years is going to dictate the way that this decade looks in crypto. What takes place last year and this year are going to be what sets up this entire decade for the cryptocurrency market, and that's why you, if you're looking at the long term, care about what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. Obviously, there's a moral reason to care too, but from a market standpoint, that would be the reason. Now, let's go ahead and look at Bitcoin briefly here, and then I'll talk about another piece of the puzzle long term. And that would be the daily chart here for Bitcoin. Looking at Bitcoin here, you can see that Bitcoin has gone through a major correction over the last 4 days. And of course, that correction is continuing. If you remember to the beginning of this stream, I told you guys it was very likely that Bitcoin's going to go to $23,328. Well, while we've been live, Bitcoin's moving there. If you'll remember, you can scrub back in the stream. I said that around here. Now Bitcoin's within spitting distance of that. Bitcoin is probably going to be at 23,328 within just the span of the next hour. That correction was pretty much written on the wall because, as I said, Bitcoin was very much struggling to maintain this level of support at 23,838. So if you're looking for a reason to if you're looking for the reasoning why Bitcoin was going to drop, the main reason, again, is because the stock market's having a hard day, the Dixie is doing very well, and because we just were not holding that level of support very confidently. And by the way, guys, if you don't already know, if you want to be able to make predictions like that with some kind of reliability, one of the best things that you can possibly do is invest in your own education. And that's where Club DeFi's principles of technical analysis comes in. If you guys are not aware, this is our current educational product where we teach you guys everything you need to know about technical analysis so that you can make those kind of predictions as well. I want you guys to be able to go into TradingView, look at the market, and understand what it's saying. Because if I remember 6 years ago when I got into crypto, I turned on a TradingView and I said, what's a TradingView? I've never heard of a candlestick moving average. Why is it moving? You know, I remember that. That was back over here. Bitcoin was at $2,900. People are like, what, $2,900? Yeah, that's when I got into crypto. I've been in crypto over half of the time that this chart's been around. You look at the BLX chart. I got into crypto right here, like at the halfway point of this entire history of this chart. I've watched over nearly half of the history of Bitcoin transpire right in front of my eyes. And every single day that I do so, I am more and more confident of the conclusion that I've drawn that education about the way these markets move is the greatest investment that you can make in yourself. And that's where Principles of Technical Analysis comes in. This course, we have 62 videos where we're going to teach you everything you need to know about technical analysis so that when that bull market does kick off, whether it be in 2 months or 6, you will be ready to make the most of that bull market. And especially even right now, if you're a trader and you want to be able to predict with a lot of accuracy where the market is going, you need to understand the way the market works. Let's just take a look at the chart right here. Boom, you see this? These are 3 red candlesticks. We have a video on that over here in Principles of Technical Analysis. It shows up right here, white soldiers and black crows. That is a 3 black crows formation. If you watch this video right here, it is only 4 minutes long because we try and be as concise as we possibly can so that you can get as much information as quickly as possible and fit this course into your busy schedule. Learning about 3 black crows would tell you, hey, this 15-minute chart looks pretty bearish. We're probably going to continue moving to the downside. And as we speak, look at what's happening. Bitcoin is moving to the downside. If you want to be a professional investor or trader in the cryptocurrency space, or if you're just a hobbyist and you want to be able to invest an extra 100, 500,000 bucks a month, 50 bucks a month, whatever it is, before you invest in Bitcoin, do me a favor, invest in your education. You can sign up with the link in the description box down below. Go to cryptojebb.com and you will find access to Club DeFi. Again, you can find all those links down below. And for anybody who was in CT2A as an alumni, you get 25% off. Shoot us an email, support@cryptojebb.com. Or if you're in Club DeFi, you will get a discount equivalent to however much you put into Club DeFi's subscription service as a discount. A couple of people have already used that discount, so make sure that you sign up using the link down below. Now, Bitcoin is likely going to continue moving on here down towards 23,328. And a lot of that does have to do with what's going on in the stock market and in the Dixie. So let's just go ahead and touch on briefly here some of the other big things that are impacting not the birth rate. Sorry, we're going to talk about that in a second. I spoiled it. What's impacting the stock market and the Dixie right now? The biggest war going on right now is not actually the war, as far as economics, is not necessarily the war between Russia and Ukraine. It's actually geopolitically more so an economic battle between America and China. Of course, those two are not shooting each other, thank God, because both of them are nuclear states. But the conflict between Russia and Ukraine is probably tied for the largest driver of geopolitics right now, on top of the conflict, if you will, between China and the United States. There's been a couple of very important updates on the Chinese front relatively recently. First and foremost, it seems that China very soon may be providing lethal aid to Russia. That is a fancy term, meaning that constitutes bullets, tanks, firearms, jet fighters, rocket launchers, whatever, something that can kill somebody. That's what China may be providing Russia with relatively soon. If that takes place, all hope of any kind of diplomacy between the United States and China stops. Period. The United States has a vested interest in helping Ukraine to beat Russia because Ukrainian boots on the ground and NATO weapons and tactical and strategic and logistical support has the ability of driving a stake through the heart of Russian society forever, and would probably end up, if Ukraine wins this war and takes back every inch of their territory, would probably end up leading to the disintegration of Russia as a functional state within the next 30 years demographically. if China backs up Russia, then they're basically saying that friendship without borders pact was true, and that essentially is China's way of no longer playing the fence but picking a side. That's the wrong side to pick geopolitically, but the problem is China has devolved into a one-man dictatorship under President Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping is so closed off that he, for the most part, has no idea what's going on in the world or in his own country. And so China has started to and will continue to make some decisions that seem pretty asinine from a strategic standpoint on the global stage, because when they make those decisions, they're not making them for any real good reason. They're just making them because Xi Jinping felt that way and woke up on the wrong side of the bed that morning. One of those has to do with potentially the greatest selfie that has ever been taken in the history of mankind. You may already be able to guess what I'm talking about, and I have the picture here. I saw this report a few days ago, but I couldn't find the picture. Are you ready for this? This literally, in my opinion, is the greatest selfie that's ever been taken in the history of cell phones. Oh man, look at this. This is hilarious. This is a selfie of a U-2 spy plane pilot taking a selfie of himself out of his U-2 plane with the Chinese spy balloon below him. He was flying over the spy balloon. He was flying at 62,000 feet. The balloon was at 60,000 feet. That perfectly encompasses the zeitgeist right now. We have old military hardware like the U-2 that was developed in the late 50s, early 60s to fly over the Soviet Union, which is now trying to be rebuilt, going over a Chinese spy balloon, which kind of implies American dominance because it's higher. I don't know. And you're also seeing, by the way, this is really cool too. You can see the U-2's shadow right there on the balloon. This is quite possibly the greatest selfie of all time. And it's a spy balloon. Like, of all ways to spy on somebody, you use a spy balloon. We have satellites with 1,000 times optical zooms now, and China decides to use a spy balloon. So anyway, the selfie's really cool, but putting that aside, and we're going to tie this back into crypto as well, here's the point. Chinese and American diplomacy is on a knife's edge with, like, not even a knife's edge, of falling into an abyss that it will probably never recover from, which will change everything geopolitically and cryptocurrencyally. Now, the interesting thing with the spy balloon, which you've no doubt heard about by now, is that the top diplomat, I think his name is Yang, for China, continues to try and say it was a meteorological balloon. It was a meteorological balloon, and he keeps telling that to Secretary of State Blinken. And Blinken's sitting over here with the actual spy balloon because it was shot down by an F-22 Raptor by an F-9X Sidewinder missile over just off the coast of South Carolina, and it was recovered by Navy divers. They have the hardware in hand. They know it's spy hardware. They have it. And so Yang is over here saying, haha, it's only a meteorological balloon, but we literally have it. It's not meteorological. It had all kinds of spy hardware on it and optical detection devices on it. And so relations between Russia and China are going completely down the toilet. Now, there's another component of the Chinese system right now and its ultimate demise over the next 10 years that you need to know about, because it is going to have a huge impact on Bitcoin. I'll go ahead and explain how it has an impact on Bitcoin first. China collapsing means the backbone of globalization, that being American and Western trade with China and its little, puppet states in the region that also work with its manufacturing facilities. That whole backbone of the Far East makes things, the Far West buys things, that is going away. Globalization is coming to an end. That changes everything on the home front, no matter where you live, whether you live in Siberia or whether you live in Manhattan. That changes everything for the way you live and for the way that people invest in the United States dollar and invest in Bitcoin. Because of the relations going down the pot, and because the United States is the largest customer of Chinese goods, and the trade war that's been going on ever since China kind of started it, then Trump codified it, then Biden escalated it, this is only going to get worse now, and including the fact that China has no less than 5 major crises going on. A housing crisis, most people don't talk about, but you probably remember Evergrande. That story has a lot to do with that. They have a water crisis. The desertification of China is insane. The entire country almost could be one giant expansion of the Gobi Desert before long. Beijing is turning into a desert, one of the biggest cities in the world. That's not good for a city that was not accustomed to that. They have a water crisis. They don't have enough water to irrigate their crops. They're net importers of food. China can't feed itself. And the most important one, that being a demographic and leadership leadership crisis. Those are the two I want to hone in on today. President Xi Jinping wants to be Mao Zedong, but he doesn't have the same political tools or the same political outlook because of demographics to do what Mao Zedong did. Mao Zedong was a horrible person. He was a genocidal maniac, but Xi Jinping wants to be able to, in his idea, make China great again. Now, in doing so, he has shot the messenger so many times that nobody can get any information to him, so he lives in a bubble, and he doesn't have any idea how to make rational decisions tactically and strategically on the global stage. So China starts doing stupid things like saying, oh, it wasn't a spy balloon. Xi Jinping may not have even known about the spy balloon project, but he probably had some kind of goonie that loved him that greenlit it because he thought it would make Xi Jinping happy. The leadership is completely backwards. But again, even worse than that is their current demographical concerns. I want to show you a couple of charts here. One of them's over on Reuters, and one of them is, actually, I have 3 charts. I'm missing one of them. Oh, no, I lost one of my charts. I'll have to get that back up here in a second. But this headline, you probably read it a few times over the last week. Everybody's seen this coming for the last 20 years, but it did come faster than people thought. China's first population drop in 6 decades sounds alarm on demographic crisis. Give me 1 second. I'm going to go to my face here and pull up this this screen. It looks like I may have closed something. I think that this is it right here. Yes. This is where I want to start here. So this is China's population and projections ever since 1960. In the 1960s, population in China reached almost 600 million people under Mao Zedong. Quite a lot of people lost their lives as a result of something we'll talk about in a second. But population doubled in the span of 60 years. Now, when that population doubled, all of those people eventually age into retirement, and you can see the birth rate in millions of people was massive in the 1950s through the 1970s. This was the annual population change with a market drop right here. We'll talk about that in a second. Notice all these people from 1950 to 1970. Well, those people are now between 52 and 72. This massive block of a couple hundred million people that were born during that time are now rapidly aging into retirement, and you can see right around 1970, the annual population change started dropping and going down. And this year, we've seen the first population decline in Chinese history across almost every single province, which means that their birth rate is so low, almost down to one child per woman, which you need 2.1 to maintain a growing population. It is so low that China no longer has a replacement generation to replace the workers right now that are only getting older and aging into retirement. China's demographical pyramid is one of the worst in human history. And if you've heard the reports of China more than likely losing half of its population by the end of the century, if something doesn't change, which it likely won't on that front, China will probably lose 700 million people due to age-related deaths and just people die. People get old and they die, and not having anyone born to replace them. That causes China to shrink. China, literally, but also in their importance on the geopolitical stage. Over the next 10 years, one of the biggest backdrop, most important factors going on in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency will be the demographical changes globally, not just in China, because this is happening in Russia, China, Japan, the European Union, everywhere else as well. That backdrop will be the biggest driver of the economy, other than if there's an invasion of China on Taiwan, which very well may happen this decade. Now, moving on here, there's another chart I want to show you, and it would be this one. You can see China's working age population and their 65-plus age population going from recent years on into forward years. We're right here at 2022. You can see the projections here. By 2050 to 2060, there will likely be almost more people over 65 than between 15 and 64. That is insane. The number of people that are in the workforce is gradually starting to decline as the number of people over 65 that are going into retirement is continuing to increase. By doing so, China runs into this problem right here. Their birth rate used to be 45 children per 1,000 people in 1965. It has continued to drop dramatically. The last time that China lost population on an annual basis was during the Great Famine between 1969 and 1961 because of horrible management of the crop system under the Communist Party led by Mao Zedong, where between 15 and 55 million people died in the span of 2 years, depending on who you ask. If you ask the communists, 3 million people died. If you ask anybody that actually doesn't have a bias in that direction, the death toll is probably 30 million people. China has not seen a purely demographical-led population decline in centuries, perhaps ever. China has peaked, and China starts to go away. They start to disappear this decade from importance geopolitically. Who replaces them? Honestly, probably the West, and not quite as strong, but in some ways, India. How does that impact Bitcoin and crypto? This changes the game geopolitically, which changes how much everything that you buy costs. It also changes all of the trade partnerships. It increases trade between the United States and Mexico, and it changes how everybody views risk-on assets like Bitcoin, because when globalization goes away, much of the wealth that it created goes away too. That is compounded with the demographical concerns of everybody aging into retirement and the concerns of $9 trillion being wiped off of the balance sheet, leading to less liquidity in the markets, and that means that the 2020s are going to be a harder decade than the 2010s were for Bitcoin. The 2010s were a golden era for Bitcoin to be founded, with a perfect environment of high liquidity, but also very low inflate. We had a lot of liquidity, and we also had some quantitative easing going on, which painted the perfect backdrop for why Bitcoin is necessary, so that there was the obvious reason why, but there was also the obvious way how. That why is going to become more crystalline as inflation continues and globalization falls apart, but the how, that being cheap money, is starting to go away, and these are many of the reasons why. How will that impact Bitcoin? Well, as we talked about at the beginning of the stream, Bitcoin, I think, will do well. I think Bitcoin will be sitting at over $250,000 at least by the end of the decade, but this decade is not going to be quite as bullish as the former. Again, this is probably one of the best markets that you can invest in right now if you're willing to weather the volatility, but it is certainly not the only one, and it's certainly not going to be quite as bullish as it was in the last 10 years. All right. The actual death toll is estimated to be between 70 and 130 million people. That's, yeah, it depends on who you ask, but that is possible. China's losses, India's gain. 70% of their population is turning 20. Yes, India, like I said, is probably going to be the big beneficiary of China's downfall. They also have a very big difference in the way that they look at the world, and they also don't have the infrastructure and the leadership capabilities that China does. Because say what you want about China, one of the benefits that they had is that they had a one-man state running everything, so they could do whatever they wanted whenever they wanted, because nobody could tell them no. So as far as what do we do with this, and I'm going to have to wrap it out here in just a couple of minutes. What do we do with this? Well, we have to adjust our view on crypto from this is going to the moon to this is going really, really high. But we need to be a little bit more careful and conservative with the way that we do things. We don't want to waste money. We want to make sure we're being smart. All right. Colin McDonald in chat. All right. Good show today, Jebb. Thank you, Grand Roofing Incorporated. I really appreciate that. In what ways could a limited exchange of nukes on a world stage be good for crypto? Could it crash the fiat currencies and push people into crypto? People would very likely be scared of anything new if that were to occur. People would not be talking about Bitcoin. They would be talking about bomb shelters. That would definitely be bad for Bitcoin, in my opinion, at this point. 10 years from now, maybe not. Maybe after it's more adopted and people are more familiar with it, that might change. But that would be a horrible thing for the price of Bitcoin right now. All right, let's see here. Yeah, guys, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it out, but don't forget, make sure to go into the link in the description box down below, sign up for Lux Algo, use coupon code Jebb, J-E-B-B, to get 20% off at checkout, and also make sure to go to CryptoJebb.com, enroll in Club DeFi's Principles of Technical Analysis so that you can learn absolutely everything you need to know about technical analysis so that you can dive right into these markets and understand how they work. I'm really excited that you guys now have access to Principles of Technical Analysis. I've been waiting to launch Club DeFi for a long time, and now it's here, and this is permanent. It's not going anywhere. This is the model. And again, if you were in CT2A, then you have a 25% off coupon code just waiting for you. Make sure to email us support at CryptoJebb.com. And also, if you're in Club DeFi subscription model, shoot us an email. We will generate you a one-time coupon code equivalent to however much money you put into Club DeFi as a discount for Club DeFi's Principles of Technical Analysis. Guys, I am going to have to wrap it out. I hope all of you have a wonderful, blessed weekend. Before I go, I do just first want to thank each and every single last one of you for watching, as always, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.
Oh, I got a real good feeling. Got a real good feeling.